My child. Big news has just arrived. A private conversation that was never meant to be seen has finally been discovered. Someone inside your soulmate's own family secretly opened the messages they had hidden about you. And after reading every single word, nothing in that family remained the same. Those messages exposed emotions your soulmate had spent months trying to hide. And now the truth can no longer stay buried. Don't skip. Because what was written in those messages is about to change everything. Listen carefully. For a long time, your soulmate believed those messages would remain hidden forever. They never imagined that someone from their own family would one day find them. Every message carried memories, unanswered questions, silent prayers, and emotions they had buried deep inside their heart. Even when everyone around them encouraged them to move on, they secretly returned to those conversations again and again, reading your words whenever loneliness became too heavy to carry. One quiet evening, while your soulmate stepped away from their phone for only a few moments, an unexpected family member noticed a notification appear on the screen. At first, they intended to ignore it. But curiosity slowly overcame restraint. As the phone unlocked, an entire history of private messages appeared before their eyes. What they expected to find was something ordinary. Instead, they discovered conversations filled with honesty, regret, longing, and promises that had never truly faded. The more they read, the more shocked they became. Your soulmate had never spoken about these feelings openly, yet every message revealed that your name still lived in their heart. There were moments where they admitted they had tried to forget you but failed. There were nights when they confessed they still wondered whether destiny would ever allow your paths to meet again. Those words carried a truth no one in the family had ever suspected. The family member sat frozen, unable to believe what they were seeing. They suddenly realized that many of the assumptions the family had made about your soulmate had been completely wrong. Everyone believed the past was over. Everyone believed your soulmate had already moved on. But these hidden conversations proved something entirely different. Behind every smile, they had been carrying an invisible weight that no one else could see. Don't skip. Because the person reading those messages was about to make a decision that would shake the entire family. And once that decision was spoken aloud, a secret buried for years would finally come into the light. The family member could no longer pretend they had never seen those messages. Every sentence echoed in their mind long after the phone had been put down. They had expected to uncover a passing memory, but instead they had discovered a love that had quietly survived every season of pain, distance, and misunderstanding. The words your soulmate had written were not the words of someone who had forgotten. They were the words of someone who had been fighting a silent battle every single day. Hidden between simple conversations were confessions that had never been spoken aloud to anyone else. They admitted that no matter how many people encouraged them to start over, a part of their heart always returned to you. They had tried to convince themselves that letting go was the right thing to do, but every attempt only reminded them of what they had truly lost. Reading those messages changed the family member forever, because for the first time they realized that the family's assumptions had been built on incomplete truths instead of reality. That night, the family member couldn't sleep. Every memory they had about you suddenly looked different. They began remembering small moments they had ignored before. The times your soulmate quietly smiled after hearing your name. The moments they became unusually silent whenever someone mentioned marriage. The occasions when they disappeared into another room just to check their phone. Those actions had once seemed meaningless, but now every detail fit together like pieces of a forgotten puzzle. The truth became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate had been protecting their feelings instead of revealing them. They had hidden everything because they feared being judged, misunderstood, or pressured to move on before they were emotionally ready. What hurt the family member most was realizing that your soulmate had carried this burden completely alone while everyone around them believed they were perfectly fine. The next morning, breakfast felt strangely quiet. Your soulmate entered the room exactly as they always did, trying to appear calm and ordinary. But the family member couldn't look at them the same way anymore. Every smile now seemed forced. Every polite answer sounded rehearsed. Behind those calm eyes, they could now recognize the sadness described inside those private messages. Several times they wanted to ask, "Are you still thinking about them?" Yet the words refused to come out. Instead, they carefully observed every expression, every pause, every deep breath. The silence itself became louder than any conversation. Without realizing it, your soulmate unknowingly revealed through their body language exactly what those messages had already confirmed. They were still emotionally connected to someone the family believed had disappeared from their life long ago. Don't skip. Because later that afternoon, something completely unexpected happened. Another relative casually mentioned arranging a new marriage meeting. The room immediately filled with excited conversation, but your soulmate's expression changed in an instant. Their smile faded. Their hands became still. They lowered their eyes and quietly excused themselves without finishing the discussion. Nobody else noticed anything unusual. Except the family member who had secretly read those messages. In that single moment, every hidden confession they had discovered became undeniably real. This was no longer imagination. The pain inside your soulmate was visible to anyone willing to see it. Unable to ignore the truth any longer, the family member quietly followed them outside. They found your soulmate sitting alone, staring into the distance with their phone resting in their hands. The screen was dark, yet they held it tightly as though it contained the only remaining connection to a chapter of life they couldn't leave behind. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, the family member broke the silence with a gentle question. "Can I ask you something? Honestly?" Your soulmate slowly nodded without looking up. What would happen if the person you've been secretly thinking about suddenly came back into your life today? The question struck like lightning. Your soulmate froze completely. Their eyes filled with emotion. Their breathing became uneven. And after a long silence, They whispered an answer so unexpected that the family member realized the biggest secret had still not been revealed. The words hung in the air for several long seconds. Your soulmate lowered their head, closed their eyes, and took a slow breath as though they had been waiting their entire life for someone to ask that question. The family member remained completely silent, refusing to interrupt. They understood that this was no ordinary conversation. This was the moment when years of hidden emotions were finally beginning to surface. When your soulmate finally spoke, their voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of countless sleepless nights. "I never stopped caring," they whispered. "I only stopped talking about it because no one wanted to hear it anymore." The family member felt their heart sink. Those few words explained everything. The silence had never meant the feelings were gone. It had only meant your soulmate had learned to hide them. Every family gathering, every celebration, every conversation about marriage had become another reminder that everyone expected them to move on. So instead of arguing, they quietly buried their emotions where no one could see them. But deep inside, nothing had truly changed. For the first time, the family member realized how much pressure your soulmate had been carrying. They remembered every time relatives had joked about finding someone new, every moment people had compared different marriage proposals, and every occasion when your soulmate had simply smiled without saying what they really felt. Everyone believed that smile meant acceptance. Now they understood it had only been protection. Behind that smile lived unanswered questions, unfinished conversations, and a heart that had refused to let go. Don't skip. Because your soulmate reached into their pocket, unlocked their phone, and opened the same private conversation that had been secretly discovered. They slowly scrolled through old messages, stopping at one that had never been deleted. The family member couldn't read every word from where they were standing, but they noticed something unforgettable. Your soulmate gently smiled through tears while looking at that message. It wasn't the smile of someone remembering the past. It was the smile of someone who still believed hope had not completely disappeared. Then your soulmate quietly admitted something that no one in the family had ever heard before. "There were so many times I wanted to send one more message. Just one. I wrote it again and again. But I never had the courage to press send. I kept wondering if it would only reopen old wounds. So I stayed silent. Hoping that if destiny ever wanted us to meet again, it would happen without me forcing it." The family member stood speechless. They had expected regret. They had expected sadness. But they had never expected such patience. Instead of chasing, blaming, or creating drama, your soulmate had chosen silence because they feared causing more pain. That realization completely changed the way the family member saw the situation. As evening approached, the family gathered in the living room once again. Laughter filled the house, but the family member could no longer enjoy the conversation. They looked around at everyone talking about future plans, celebrations, and new beginnings, all while one of the most important truths remained hidden in plain sight. They knew that if no one spoke up, your soulmate would continue pretending everything was fine. Finally, the family member made a quiet decision. I can't keep this secret anymore, they thought. But if I reveal what I discovered, everything in this family could change forever. At that exact moment, another relative walked into the room holding an envelope that had just arrived. It came this afternoon, they said. It's addressed to you. Everyone turned toward your soulmate. The room fell completely silent. Your soulmate slowly took the envelope into their hands. And the moment they recognized the handwriting on the front, the color disappeared from their face. Without saying a single word, they whispered one name under their breath. And the family member instantly realized. The private messages were only the beginning. The real truth was hidden inside that mysterious envelope. And once it was opened, there would be no turning back. The room became so quiet that even the sound of the envelope being unfolded seemed louder than anyone's breathing. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on your soulmate. No one understood why such an ordinary-looking envelope had completely changed their expression. Only the family member who had secretly discovered those private messages understood that this was connected to a story much deeper than anyone else realized. Your soulmate held the envelope in trembling hands for several moments before opening it. It was almost as if they already knew that whatever was written inside would change everything. Slowly, they removed a single folded letter. Before reading it, they closed their eyes for a brief second, gathering the courage they had been missing for so long. As their eyes moved across the first few lines, they suddenly stopped. Their breathing became uneven. Their lips trembled. Tears quietly gathered in their eyes. No one in the room had ever seen them react this way before. One relative immediately asked, "Is everything all right?" But your soulmate couldn't answer. They simply stared at the letter as though every sentence had awakened memories they had tried to lock away forever. Don't skip. Because the family member recognized the same look they had seen while reading those private messages. This wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was the expression of someone whose heart had just been reminded of a promise they had never truly forgotten. Finally, after a long silence, your soulmate folded the letter and quietly stood up. I need a little time alone." Without waiting for anyone to respond, they walked out of the room. Several relatives looked at each other in confusion. What was written in that letter? Who sent it? Why are they acting like this? Questions filled the room, but no one had any answers. Only the family member quietly followed behind. Outside, your soulmate sat on the old garden bench, holding the letter tightly against their chest. The family member approached slowly and spoke with kindness. "You don't have to hide anymore." Your soulmate looked up with surprised eyes. "What do you mean?" The family member took a deep breath. "I know about the messages." For a moment, everything froze. Your soulmate's face turned pale. They couldn't believe those words. My messages?" They whispered. "Yes," the family member replied softly. I accidentally saw them. I read more than I should have. And I'm sorry. But after reading them, I finally understood what you've been carrying all this time. Instead of becoming angry, your soulmate simply looked down. A single tear fell onto the letter. I was afraid this day would come, they admitted. Not because I wanted to hide the truth forever, but because I didn't think anyone in this family would understand. The family member gently placed a hand on their shoulder. I understand now. And I think the rest of the family deserves to know the truth too. Your soulmate slowly shook their head. No, not yet. There are things they still don't know. There was one conversation. One final message. That changed everything. The family member felt their heart race. What final message? Your soulmate looked at the phone in their hand. With trembling fingers, they opened the conversation once again and slowly scrolled all the way to the very bottom. There. They whispered. That last message is the reason I never moved on. The family member leaned closer. The screen illuminated both of their faces. The final message appeared. After reading just the first sentence, the family member covered their mouth in complete shock. They finally understood why your soulmate had protected those private messages for so long. Because that last message contained one unbelievable truth. A truth powerful enough to change not only your soulmate's future, but the future of the entire family. The family member stared at the final message for what felt like an eternity. Their hands began to tremble, not because the words were dramatic, but because they were so deeply sincere. There were no accusations. No anger. No attempts to blame anyone. Instead, the message carried something far more powerful. Hope. It said that no matter how complicated life had become, some connections could never be erased by distance, silence, or time. It spoke about forgiveness instead of revenge, patience instead of pressure, and faith instead of fear. It ended with one unforgettable thought. If our paths are ever meant to cross again, let it happen with honesty, peace, and courage. The family member slowly lowered the phone. Now they understood why your soulmate had never deleted that conversation. It wasn't because they were trapped in the past. It was because those words had become a quiet reminder to never let bitterness replace kindness. For the first time in years, the family member realized that the story everyone believed was incomplete. They had judged a situation without knowing the full truth. They had encouraged your soulmate to move forward without understanding what had been left unresolved. That realization filled them with regret. Later that evening, the entire family gathered once again. The atmosphere felt different. Conversations that once seemed ordinary now carried a strange silence beneath them. Finally, the family member stood up. There is something I need to say. The room became still. I made a mistake. I believe things about this situation without knowing the truth. I now understand that real feelings cannot be measured by how loudly someone speaks about them. Sometimes the deepest emotions are the ones people hide the most. Everyone looked toward your soulmate. For the first time. No one interrupted. No one judged. No one pressured them to explain. Instead, they simply listened. Your soulmate slowly stood and took a deep breath. I never wanted anyone to feel guilty, they said softly. I only needed time to understand my own heart. I stayed silent because I didn't want this family divided over my feelings. Those words changed everything. The room that had once been filled with assumptions was now filled with understanding. One by one, family members admitted they had misunderstood the situation. Some apologized. Others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because the truth had finally replaced misunderstanding. In that moment, your soulmate smiled, a genuine smile that no one had seen in a very long time. It wasn't the smile of someone who suddenly had all the answers. It was the smile of someone who no longer had to carry their burden alone. The private messages that were once hidden had unexpectedly become the bridge that reunited hearts, healed old wounds, and opened the door to honest conversations. Sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't that a secret is discovered. It's that the truth gives people the courage to understand one another. And sometimes, the message that changes everything isn't the one everyone reads. It's the one that reminds people to choose compassion over assumptions.